His older brother, Walter, and his best friend, Bo, are in Walter's truck driving down a dirt trail with some camping and fishing equipment in the back. The truck rattles and shakes as they hit a lot of bumps along the way. William says, "You couldn't have picked a less bumpy road. I'm starting to get a headache over here." Walter says, "Oh, shut up. Stop your whining. A little headache ain't hurt nobody." William replies, "Easy for you to say. You're not the one feeling every bump and grind." Walter playfully says, "I'll get you some Tylenol when we get to the camping spot to fix that little boo-boo on top of your head," and then rubs the top of William's head. William knocks his hand off of his head and says, "Stop touching me and focus on the road." Walter then chuckles and turns back to the road. William then says, "Bo, you're good back there." Bo, who was looking out the window, says, "Yeah, I'm so excited to finally be in these woods again. I haven't been here since Daddy took me hunting." Walter then says, "Yeah, same for us. We ain't been out here since we were teenagers, I think." He turns to William and says, "That's about right, ain't it?" William shakes his head, yes. Walter then says, "Yeah, I knew that sounded about right. But anyway, our dad and uncle used to take us out here all the time to go camping. But once I turned 18, and then 2 years later," he then puts his arm around William. "This little rascal turned 18. William annoyingly rolled his eyes and said, "Why do you keep calling me little rascal? We're not little kids anymore." Walter then playfully says, "Because that's what you are. You're my little rascal, kid or not." William then knocks his arm off of him and says, "No, I'm not. I told you to stop calling me that." Bo chuckles at their interaction and says, "Come on, William. You should be happy that you have an older brother that loves you enough to give you a nickname." William then looks back and says, "Bo, whose friend are you?" Bo says, "I'm your friend. That's why I'm telling you to cut your brother some slack." Walter responds, "Right." William looks at both of them, then rolls his eyes and turns towards the window. Walter then turns to Bo and says, "Don't worry about him. We do this all the time." Bo then chuckles and says, "Got you. What part of the camping grounds are we going to? It isn't near any camping spots I've heard of." William then says, "Oh no, we're not going into any camping spots. Going to this little remote place we always used to camp at. Dad says camping spots are always too crowded and noisy. You can never truly get the true experience there. Out here, it's just you and the wilderness." Bo then nervously says, "Are you sure this is a great idea? I've heard there has been some disappearances in these woods." William then says, "Come on now, Bo. We're 3 tall, muscular guys. Ain't no person or creature in that case is crazy enough to attack us. And actually, I almost forgot. We have 2 guys from the logging company me and Walter work at, and they're built just like us. And also, we all have guns. You brought your gun, right?" Bo says, "Well, a hunting bow, but..." "Yes." William then continues, "Okay then, so nothing's going to happen." That's when Walter stops the truck and says, "We're here." Walter walks up to the 2 men who already have their tents set up. Meanwhile, William and Bo head towards the back of the truck to go get the equipment. One man turns to him. "Well, damn, here I was thinking that you ditched us." Walter chuckles, saying, "My bad, man. I got a little lost back there." The man then said, "I told your dumbass to follow me." Then they dabbed each other up, and the man pulled Walter in for a hug. Another man then walks up and says, "Hey, Walter." And they also dab each other up and pull in for a hug. William and Bo walk up with the bags. And the first man walks up to him and says, "There's my favorite butler brother," and gives William a big hug. William then pats him on the back and says, "Great to see you too, Billy." Billy then says, "It's always good to see you." He then looks over William's shoulder and says, "Who's that guy?" William then turns and says, "Oh, that's Bo, my best friend." Billy then says, "Oh," and reaches his hand out and says, "Well, nice to meet you, Bo. Any friend of the Butler boys is a friend of mine." Bo reaches out his hand and shakes Billy's hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." Billy then says, "Benjamin, come over here." Benjamin then stops talking to Walter and walks up to Billy. Billy puts his hand on Benjamin's shoulder and says, "This is my son, Benjamin." Bo puts his hand out and says, "Nice to meet you, Benjamin. My name is Bo." Benjamin shakes his hand and says, "Nice to meet you too, Bo." Walter, William, and Bo set up their tents. Then Billy says, "Now that everybody has their tents up, let's get this day started. I was thinking we all go hiking today." William says, "Fine by me." Walter says, "Same here." Bo says, "I love hiking." Billy says, "All right, let's go." And the 5 men grab their bags and begin to walk down the trail. It was the fall season, so there was lots of leaves on the ground, and the leaves were a mixture of yellow, orange, and green. It was an amazing sight. Men barely spoke and just took pictures and admired the beauty of nature. After about an hour or two, they returned back to the campsite. They then grabbed their fishing equipment and went out to the nearby lake. Once they get to the lake, they put bait on their fishing hooks and threw out their lines and sat down into their chairs they brought with them. The men cracked open some beers and started drinking and talking. After 10 minutes, Billy was reeling in a fish. Everyone gathered around him, waiting to see what he had caught. He reeled in a small fish, barely big enough to feed one of them. Everyone looked at the fish disappointedly. Billy threw the fish in frustration and yelled, "Damn it! Why do we keep catching the small ones? Where's the big ones at?" Benjamin put his hand on his father's shoulder and said, "Calm down, Dad, we're going to get one." Billy then angrily said, "Well, tell them to hurry up then," and aggressively sat back down in his chair. William then said in an annoyed tone, "Seriously, I'm starving." Bo said, "Can't we just move to a different spot?" Billy said, "This is supposed to be the best spot. All of the big fish gather around here." Bo said, "Well, obviously they moved somewhere else." Benjamin, then turning towards his dad, said, "He's right. We should move to a different spot instead of just staying here." Billy, a bit annoyed, "Yeah, I guess you're right." He then gets up and grabs his chair. Everyone starts getting up. As William was folding his chair out of the corner of his eye on the side of the river, he saw a creature, tall, skinny, and what looked to be gray. It was hard to tell due to the creature almost blending in with the trees perfectly. As he was staring, Walter grabbed his shoulder, breaking him out of his concentration. He says, "Hey man, you good? You look like you just saw a ghost." William says, Yeah, I'm good." He then looks back across the lake. He continued saying, "I thought I saw something on the other side of the river." Everyone then turned and looked, but saw nothing. Bo then put his hand on William's shoulder and said, "Don't think about it too much. It was probably just a deer, man." Before William was able to respond, Walter pointed at Bo's fishing pole and said, "Yo, look." Everyone turned to look at the fishing pole, and it was pulling violently. Billy excitedly said, "Hurry up, reel it in, it's a big one." Bo quickly grabbed his fishing pole, reeling and pulling at the fishing pole. He was struggling. But after 2 minutes, he pulled in a huge fish. It was so big that Bo had to use both of his hands just to pick it up. Everyone screamed out in happiness. Billy said, "I knew all the big fish were in this area. Now come on, let's get this back to the campsite. I'm starving." As everyone started walking back towards the camp, William turned back around and looked to the other side of the lake where he saw the creature was. He stood there for a moment. That's when Walter turned around. He said, "Hey, you little rascal, are you coming?" William said, "Yeah." He then turned around and started walking back to camp with everyone else. When they get back to the campsite, they fired up the grill, cut up the fish, and cooked it. After everyone was done eating, they went back to their respective tents. But William couldn't fall asleep. He kept thinking about the creature and how it looked. He'd never seen something so tall. It looked around 8 feet. And it was very skinny, like you can see his bones. Bo said it must have been a deer, but William knew it wasn't a deer. He also began to notice how the forest was eerily quiet now. And now that he thinks about it, it's been like that for the entire day. After 5 hours of sitting there, thinking about it, he began to just chalk it up as getting too drunk, even though he knew he didn't. He thought that the eerie quietness must have been because the animals knew humans were in the area and wanted to stay away, even though him and his family has been out in this forest before, and the animals were never this quiet. But he let himself think that to help him calm down. And he finally went to sleep. The next day, the men went to a nearby waterfall and rode it like a water slide and swimmed in the small body of water the waterfall created. Then later that day, they told stories about their childhood around the campfire. The next day, they went ziplining and played cops and robbers. They used paintball guns to show when someone got hit. Later on that night, everyone is sitting around a campfire laughing. Billy said, "If y'all think that's a doozy, let me tell you a story about this idiot right here," and puts his hand on Benjamin's shoulder. Benjamin playfully rolls his eyes and says, "Come on, Pops, don't tell that story." Billy responded, "Now come on, son. That story is too good not to tell." Bo playfully said, "Oh, he'll be okay. Go ahead and tell the story." Billy then continues, "All right, so we were on a camping trip. It was me, Benjamin, my brother, and my 2 nieces and nephew. We were celebrating Benjamin's 21st birthday, and this boy got so drunk, like hammered." Walter, William, and Bo started laughing. Billy then continued, And this drunk idiot decided it would be a good idea to jump in a field of poison ivy butt naked. The next day he was extremely hungover and was scratching all over. We had to take him to the hospital. Everyone burst out laughing. Walter then said, "That reminds me of this time when..." He didn't even get to finish his sentence. When they heard some rustling in the woods, everyone immediately went quiet to listen. They heard some more rustling, and it was getting closer. Everyone grabs their hunting rifles, and Bo grabs his hunting bow as the noise got closer. They put their finger on the trigger and was about to fire when a dog walked into view. A medium-sized hound dog came into view. Bo lowered his bow and walks up to the dog, puts out his hand for the dog, the sniff. And once the dog licks his hand, Bo pets him on the head. William says, "Bo, don't just put your hand out at random dogs." Bo responds, "What are you talking about?" The dog is friendly. William says, "How can you say that? You don't know this dog." "Oh, come on, William, look at him. He's literally playing with me. If that doesn't show he's friendly, I don't know what does." William rolls his eyes and says, "Whatever, just be careful." The dog then walks away from Bo and walks up to William, rubbing its body against his leg. Bo says, "See? Friendly." Walter then walks up and says, "Yeah, William, calm down. It's just a dog." The dog then starts walking around and playing with everyone. After a while, William calms down and starts playing with the dog too. The next day after the men ate breakfast, the dog was acting strangely. It didn't have the same friendly high energy it had the night before. Now the dog wanted to stay in Bo's tent, and whenever anyone tried to play with him, he would bark. Everybody was confused, and Billy and Walter just chalked it up to the dog being nocturnal. Then they left to look for the dog's people, but they couldn't find anyone. After looking for hours, they're heading back to the camp near dusk. As the sun started to set, the dog started to return to the same high energy and friendly behavior and displayed the night before. After playing with the dog for an hour, everyone was headed to sleep when the dog started barking at Bo. He was confused at first until Walter said, "I think he's trying to get you to take him into the woods." William said, "Yeah, he may have to go use the bathroom." Bo said, "Well, why don't it just walk into the woods? It doesn't need me there." Benjamin then chuckled and said, "Because it likes you and it wants to keep you close." Bo rolls his eyes and says, "Whatever." He then gets up and follows the dog into the woods. After 15 minutes waiting, William gets up and walks a little into the woods and starts calling Bo's name. After 3 shouts, Bo walks out from the tree line. But he looks different. He has this blank expression on his face and his eyes look lifeless. And Bo says, voice almost sounding mechanical, "Hey, William, what's wrong? Why are you screaming?" "Because you've been out in the woods with that dog for a while now. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." Bo chuckles and says, Yeah, I'm good." William then looks around and says, "Where is the dog, by the way?" Bo then says, "Oh, the dog." His eyes start moving around rapidly as if he was thinking on what to say. He then looked at William and says, "The dog just ran away after we got a little bit further into the woods. I tried to chase it, but it got away. That's what took me so long." William just stared at Bo. He scanned Bo up and down, noticing his upright posture, something Bo's never done. His smile was even wrong. Bo always had a smile that could light up any room he was in. Meanwhile, the smile he had now was like he was trying to imitate his own smile. After staring at him for a few seconds, William then say, "Bo, are you sure you're okay? You're not acting like yourself right now." Bo then smiled even harder and said, "Yes, I promise you I'm okay. I'm just tired, that is all." Then walked right past William and back into the camp. Walter waved at Bo, saying, "There you are." "We was worried about you," Bo said. "Yeah, I'm okay." He then entered his tent without saying another word. Benjamin said, "That was weird. The guy's usually way more talkative than that." Walter just shrugged his shoulders and says, "The guy's just tired." He then stretches and yawns because God knows I am. Billy does the same thing and says, "Me too." And they both get up and head towards their tents. Benjamin thinks to himself, "Yeah, you're probably right," and just gets up and heads towards his tent. William, on the other hand, just stares at Bo's tent with a feeling of uneasiness, wondering if the man or a thing that just entered that tent is really his best friend. William then enters his tent so he can go to sleep, but instead he sat up for hours thinking about Bo, the dog, and the creature that he saw at the lake. The next day, everyone was sitting by the fire eating breakfast and talking about the next activity. Billy says, maybe we can all go kayaking again. Walter responds, no, kayaking was fun, but we're just going to be running the same routes again. Benjamin then said, how about cops and robbers again? We all had so much fun with it the other day.
Billy said, that sounds like a good idea. It doesn't really require us to really run around and set things up. All we had to do is shoot at each other mostly. Walter angrily says, I really don't want to get shoot up again. I still have paint in places it shouldn't be. William then says, then learn to dodge next time. He then shoots at him in the back of the head with a paintball gun. Walter angrily turned to William, and William says, yes, still got it. Walter gets up and jumps at William, and they start playfully wrestling over the paintball gun. Billy and Benjamin start laughing at them. As they were wrestling, he looked over at Bo, and he was sitting there, staring at them. William stopped wrestling and turned to Bo and says, hey man, are you okay? Bo says, yeah, I'm okay. Why do you ask? William said, 'cause man, you've been acting kind of weird today. You've just been sitting around staring at everyone and you've barely touched your food. This is very uncharacteristic of you. Bo doesn't say anything at first, and he just sits there looking like he's in deep thought for a few seconds. Then he says, I'm just a little tired. That's why I've been just looking at everyone. And as for food, I'm not that hungry. William says, oh, okay then. That's when Billy says, well, okay then. So are we all playing cops and robbers or what? Benjamin quickly says, hell yeah. Walter gives a little sigh and says, fine, I guess I'll play. Benjamin then puts his arm around Walter and says, oh, cheer up, brother. This is your chance to get your revenge. Billy then says, William and Bo, are you two playing? William turned to him and said, yeah, I'm playing. Bo said, I would like to, but I'm not feeling well at the moment. I'm going to sit this one out. William stares at Bo, knowing that he loves this game and would never pass up on an opportunity to play it, even if he was sick. Billy says, okay then, walks into the forest and grabs a few sticks. He then places it in the middle of the group and say, all right, guys, everyone pull a stick, and whoever has the biggest gets to pick who is on their team and if they want to be cops or robbers. After everyone picks, Benjamin got the biggest one, and he says, I pick William, and he says he wants to be the robbers. Walter and Billy stays in the camp and has to wait a minute for Benjamin and William to walk into the forest and hide. As they are walking, Benjamin turns to William and say, hey, I didn't want to say this in front of everyone, but I've noticed what you've been noticing. Something isn't right about Bo. I didn't know the guy for very long, but what I've observed about him these last few days, he seems to be pretty energetic and lively. Whatever that thing is, it isn't him. William turned to him and said, well, I'm glad someone else finally notices, and I'm not by myself in this. But why are you so sure, Benjamin? Ben says. Because the night before, when I went outside to go to use the bathroom, I entered the forest a little bit, so no one would see me when I saw him a bit deeper in. Just staring at the campsite with that cold, dead stare he's been having all day. I almost didn't recognize him because it was so dark, but a bit of the moonlight trickled in through the trees, and I was able to tell it was him. After I used the bathroom, I hurried up and went back into my tent, but I wasn't able to sleep very well. That unsettled me. William said, yeah, whatever this thing is, it's definitely not Bo, and we need to find him. Benjamin said, and how are you supposed to do that? We don't know where he could be. William says, while we play the game, just look around. He should be around here somewhere. While they were walking around the forest, they searched around for Bo's body, working under logs, moving around leaves to see if they can find any traces of blood or a body part, and even up in the trees. But each time they looked, they couldn't find anything. It was reaching the end of the day, and the sun was starting to set. They were on their 5th game, and they decided to play one more. This time, William and Benjamin walked deeper into the forest than they ever have, and they come across what looks to be a small clearing. In the middle of it, there is the mangled remains of Bo. When William sees him, he screams out in grief and runs over to his body, and Benjamin started crying. Hearing the screams, Walter and Billy ran over to where they were and saw the gruesome state Bo's body was in. When they saw it, Walter just stared and kept repeating, oh God, and Billy started throwing up. Walter then walks up beside William
and puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "I'm so sorry, brother." Then they hear the voice of Bo saying from behind them, "Is everything okay, everybody?" Everyone turned, and they saw the creature still in Bo's skin. William became enraged and grabbed a one-handed woodcutter axe and ran towards the creature, yelling, "What did you do to my best friend?" He swung at him, but the creature dodged, then kicked William away. William went flying several feet and hit the ground hard. Walter ran up to William, making sure he was okay, and the creature started convulsing, and they can hear bones breaking, and the skin peeling off, revealing a grayish brown underneath. The creature grew several feet, and it was very skinny. The creature gives a scream that doesn't sound like any human or animal any of the men have ever heard. With surprising speed, it charges William. Walter quickly grabs William and throws him to the side right before the monster's claws hit him. The creature is about to strike at them again, but then Billy pulls out his revolver and starts shooting at it. The creature started leaking out black blood, and it turned towards Billy and then runs at Billy, claws out. That's when Benjamin tackles Billy out of the way, then using a large branch hitting the creature on his side. The branch does little to no damage and just breaks on the creature's body. For a few seconds, it just stands there looking at Benjamin amused and then slashes at him, cutting open his body. Blood goes splattering everywhere and his guts are hanging out, and you can even see some of his bones. Billy screams out in grief and runs next to his son. William runs up behind the creature and drives his axe into the back of the creature's leg. The creature grunts in pain and is about to slash at him. But Billy raises his revolver and shoots the creature in the head. It was a clean shot, and the creature screeches out in pain, clutching his head, and then jumps onto a tree and flees into the deep woods. William and Walter then runs up next to Billy. Benjamin's body. Billy is violently shaking him. "Ben, please wake up. Come on, son, don't do this to me. Please wake up." He then turns to Walter and William and screams, "What are you two just standing there for? Go get the truck. We need to get him out of here." Walter and William doesn't move, and just stares at him sadly, knowing there's nothing that could be done. And Benjamin is already dead. Billy starts smacking Benjamin on the face, screaming at him to wake up. Walter then walked up to him, got down on his knees and hugged Billy and whispered to him, "He's gone, man, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." All three men started crying. After a few seconds of all of them just sitting there, William turns towards where the creature ran into the forest, grabbed his axe, and started walking towards the tree line. Walter gets up and says, "Will, what are you doing?" William responds, "I'm about to go. Kill that bastard." Walter quickly says, "No, William, you're not going out there. We're leaving." William responded, "I'm not going anywhere until this thing is dead." Walter grabs William's arm and says, "William, don't be stupid. You saw what that thing done to Benjamin and Bo. If we stay out here, what do you think it's going to do to us?" William quickly responded, "That thing wore Bo's face. It mimicked his voice and it desecrated his corpse. Bo was like a brother to me, Walter. I'm not going to let that thing get away with that." William pulls his arm out of Walter's grasp and keeps walking towards the tree line. Walter runs up behind him and says, "William, I understand where you're coming from. Truly, I do. But if we go out there, we are going to die." It was shrugging off multiple gunshots like it was nothing. "What do you think we are going to do with just a knife and axe? I'm not going to let you sacrifice your life for a dead man. Now let's go." Right before William responded, Billy responded, "No, we're not going anywhere. Not just for Benjamin and not just for Bo, but for ourselves. You said if we hunt this thing down, it will pick us off. What do you think it would do if we tried to run away? It's not going to let us leave." Walter thought about it for a moment. He then clenched his fist and cursed under his breath and said, "But we're not doing it now." William angrily said, "Why? It's wounded. Let's go get this bastard." Walter then said, "Think about it, you idiot. This thing probably operates best at night." Billy quickly responded, "What makes you say that?" Walter said, "Well, going off how it acted when it was wearing the skin of the dog and Bo. It didn't really operate during the daytime and was pretty active during the night. So off that basic observation, I would assume it's nocturnal. We should go back to the camp and set up a fire, so if it tries to attack, we'll see it coming." They go back to camp to collect their gear. Billy grabs Benjamin's rifle, a machete, and a few bottles to make some Molotov cocktails. Walter got his hunting rifle and a large hunting knife. William got his rifle and Bo's hunting bow and a large axe. After everyone is done, Walter says, "We're going to start a fire and stand here back to back, and we're going to watch all directions. If the creature appears from anywhere, we will see it." Billy nods his head, and the men then stood back to back, looking around for the creature. They did that all night until the sun came up. Billy then says, "Great, so all we did was waste the night of standing around and doing nothing. Meanwhile, that creature that killed my son is still out there. Walter then responds,
You're still alive, ain't you? Billy then turns and says, Yeah, but so is that creature. Tonight I'm going out and I'm finding this thing. I don't care what you say.
Walter walks up beside him and says, Billy, I understand where you're coming from, but making dumb decisions isn't going to get us anywhere. Billy then looks at Walter and says, Do you have children, Walter? Walter was caught off guard by the question and took a few seconds to answer, but then he said, Yes, I have 2 little girls at home. Billy then responds, Are they alive? Walter then quickly says, Of course they are. Billy then says, Then you don't understand. Until you lose a child, you don't understand. As Walter and Billy continue to argue, William starts looking around the campsite, looking at the ground. Then he comes up with an idea, and he turns to them and says, Hey. Billy and Walter then turn to look at him. He says, I have an idea. Something that could satisfy both of you. Billy says, Like what? William says, We stay in the camp, but we don't start a fire. We dig 3 ditches, and then we cover them up with a tarp or something, and just put a bunch of leaves on them, so it will blend into the surroundings. And when the creature comes around looking for us, we pop out and we kill him. Walter and Billy look at each other. Then Walter walks up to William and puts his hand on his shoulder. That's actually a good idea, little brother. William chuckles. You say that like I don't have any good ideas. Walter then playfully says, Well, if we're being technical. Then both Walter and William starts laughing. After a few seconds, Billy says, Sorry to break up the little brotherly moment, but how are we going to dig these holes? We don't have a shovel. William looks at Walter, and Walter says, Don't look at me. I'm not the one that came up with the plan. William thinks for a moment and then says, Well, you 2 have machetes and I have my axe, so we can use these to start digging. The men dug for hours, the dry earth making it hard for them to be able to dig enough to even make a small hole. But after 3 hours of grueling work, they finally made some ditches big enough for the men to be able to fit in. The arms ached, and they were tired and a bit hungry, but they knew they had to finish the trap. They went into the woods and cut down some branches, and they made some makeshift doors, and they put it over the holes, then covered it with leaves. After they're done with everything, they go to the lake and catch some fish. After eating dinner, they wait until the sun is about to go down before getting into their makeshift ditches. The men waited for around 2 hours in complete silence and darkness. When they heard the sound of heavy footsteps and snapping twigs, all the men set up in the ditch, waiting until the creature gets into the middle of the campsite. They listen as the creature gets closer and closer, but then it stops right at the edge of the camp. They can hear it breathing and sniffing the air. A few seconds later, they heard the sound of Beau's voice. Guys, you there? William gritted his teeth in anger. He thought to himself, That damn thing is messing with me. It's really trying to use Beau's voice to lure me out. I can't wait for that thing to get into the middle of the campsite so I can pump that bastard full of bullets, then finish it off with Beau's arrow. After a minute of using Beau's voice, it realized it wasn't working. So it quickly changed tactics using the voice of Benjamin. It said, Guys, are you out there? Come on, guys, this isn't funny. Billy covered his mouth with his hand and started crying. Walter thought to himself, Come on, guys, don't let this thing get into your heads. Remember the task at hand. Then the creature says, using Benjamin's voice, Dad, please come out, I'm scared. Billy had enough of it and sprung up out of the ditch and started firing. The creature lunged at Billy, ready to strike, but William and Walter quickly bursted out of their ditches and started firing at the creature. It stopped mid-run, hands covering its face to protect from the bullets. Billy and William starts to move around the creature, trying to completely surround it so it would have nowhere to escape. As they were shooting the creature, they thought to themselves that this thing is surprisingly durable, despite its weak-looking frame. After a minute of them shooting at the creature, Billy runs out of bullets. The creature, seeing an opportunity, it lunges at him, claws out. Billy quickly pulls out his machete and blocked the strike. It then uses its other claws to slashing him again. Billy dodged the strike, then used his machete to cut the creature's leg. Right after that, Walter and William ran out of bullets. Then Walter put out his machete, and William pulled out his axe. The creature, noticing William and Walter running up towards it, took his claw and dug it into the dirt and flung some dirt at them. The 2 men stopped immediately, trying to get the dirt out of their eyes. The creature then turned back to Billy. as Billy was about to try to attack it again, but it grabbed Billy and lifted him up into the air. Then it said to Billy, using Ben's voice, "Are you scared, Dad?" Billy screamed at the top of his lungs at the creature. "You bastard, I'm going to kill you!" The creature gave a cricket grin and squeezed. Billy's bones cracked and he coughed up blood. Just then, Walter was clearing up his eyes just in time enough to see Billy's body go limp. Then the creature threw him at their feet. Walter bent down to Billy as he continued to cough up blood and said, "Oh shit, Billy, it's going to be okay, man. Stay with me." Just then, William started clearing up his eyes. At first, he looks up at the creature who's just staring at them with a satisfying grin on his face. He then looked down at his feet, see Walter talking to Billy. He notices Billy's bleeding from his mouth, nose, and even his eyes. He kneels down and holds up Billy's head. Billy coughs up some more blood and says, "You two boys, finish that fucker off." Walter says, "Nah, man, we got to get you to a hospital." Billy says, "Nah, man, I ain't going nowhere. I'm done for. All my bones are shattered, and plus that thing won't let you all leave." Walter and William start crying as Billy says, "You two boys survive for me, survive for Benjamin, and survive for Bo." He then goes limp in their arms, and they both just stand there, staring at his body, completely in shock. They can hear the creature with heavy steps walking out closer towards them. Even says, using Billy's voice, "Come on, boys, don't let me down. Stand up and fight." The creature began to step closer. It starts reaching out his hand. William then grabbed his axe and slashed into the creature's hand, leaving a deep gash. The creature shrieked out in pain as Walter ran behind it and stabbed it in the back of the leg. The creature turned and slashed at Walter. He barely dodges. William pulls out Bo's bow and starts shooting arrows into the creature's back. The creature turns to him and starts slashing and kicking at him. He manages to dodge and weave most of the strikes, but the last kick manages to hit him and he was sent flying. He thinks he broke some ribs. Walter jumps onto the creature back and starts stabbing it multiple times. The creature then grabs Walter and begins to squeeze just like he did with Billy. William yells, "No!" And he pulls out the last arrow and shoots it into the creature's eye. It screeches out in pain as it drops Walter to the ground, and William runs up to the creature and using his axe to cut the creature's leg off. It falls to the ground, and he takes the axe to the creature's chest and starts hacking at it until his chest is completely open and he can see all of its internal organs. After the encounter, he turns and runs up to Walter. He says, Walter, are you okay?" He smacks his face a couple times and presses his head to his chest. His breathing is ragged, but he's alive. William takes a sigh of relief, and he picks him up and starts running towards the truck. He then hears the sounds of sirens in the distance, and he sees red and blue lights coming toward them. William lowers Walter to the ground. "It's okay, man, help is coming." When the cops get close, William puts his hands up and say, "Hey, over here." The cops step out the car, guns raised. "You, stop right there." William responds, Whoa, what are you doing?" The officer says, "We got a call from a local hunter that he was hearing strange noises and lots of gunfire around here." William says, "Yes, there was a creature around, but me and my friends and brother killed it, and now my brother is hurt, and we need to get him to a hospital." The officer said, "A creature, you say?" He then looks over at another officer and lowers his gun and pulls out his taser. He tases William, and William falls to the ground. The world spun as the electricity surged through William's body. He hit the dirt hard, his vision blurring as he watched the officers move towards Walter. "Secure the suspect," one shouted, the handcuffs clicking loudly. "Wait," William gasped. One of the officers walked toward the clearing where the creature lay. He shone a high-powered flashlight on the hacked-open chest and the missing leg. He stopped dead in his tracks. "Dispatch," the officer's voice crackled over his radio, sounding shaky for the first time. "We're going to need more units. And a coroner." William felt the cold steel of cuffs lock around his wrists. He didn't fight. He just looks at the paramedics as they get to Walter, then he blacks out. Walter wakes up, his eyes hurting from the hospital light directly above him. He covers his eyes. After a few seconds, they adjusted. He began to look around, noticing he was in a hospital room. He tries to sit up, but he's in pain all over his body. He sits back, collecting his thoughts. He then remembers what happened with the creature. He then thinks to himself, William. Walter musters up all the strength that he has to get up and starts yelling, "William!" The doctor's quickly rushing into his room and tells him, "Sir, you have to lie down. You need to rest." Walter pushes one of the doctors off of him and says, "Get off me." Then he screams, "William, where are you, man?" Another doctor stands in front of him and says, "Sir, you need to rest." Walter says, "No, I need to find my brother." The doctor says, "Look, your brother's fine, sir. Just please, lie down." Walter gets up in the man's face and says, "I'm not laying down until I see my brother." The doctor was about to respond when they hear a voice say, "Let him go." They turn to where the voice came from and they see a tall, muscular man in a military general outfit with 2 armed men. The doctor says, "But sir," the general quickly responded with a commanding but calm tone, "The man just wants to make sure his brother is okay, Henry. Let him go. I'll keep a close eye on him." The doctor sighs in frustration. He says, "Well, at least let me get him a wheelchair." The general nods his head. The doctor walks off and gets Walter a wheelchair. He then wheels him to William's room, and when he sees him, William quickly gets up and runs up to Walter, and they give each other a big hug. William says, "I'm so happy to see you. I thought you might have been dead." Walter laughs and says, "It'd take more than that to kill me. You should know that, little brother," then gives a little pat to the top of William's head. The general says, "Sorry to break up this happy brotherly moment, but we have some things we need to talk about." Walter says, "What do we need to talk about?" The general says, "You 2 boys are lucky to be alive. You 2 should thank God that it was only a juvenile." Walter says, "Hold on, wait, that was a juvenile. That thing was 8 feet tall and stronger than a bear." The general chuckles. "That is nothing compared to the adults. They're around 12 feet and are strong enough to punch through solid brick. And those hunting rifles and machetes and axes you guys are using, it wouldn't have worked on them. Nothing but military-grade weapons will work on the adults. But that's not the only thing you will have to worry about. They're a lot more skilled at mimicking other people and stalking their prey. How long were you boys out there for?" Walter says, "Me and our friends were only out there for 5 days." William then said, "But I saw it on day 1 when we were fishing by the lake. I saw it on the other side near the tree line." Only for a few seconds, though. The general nods his head and says, "Yep, that means you guys were one of its first hunt. If you were going up against an adult or one with experience, it would have hunted you for weeks, maybe even months, before it ever made its move. This one that you guys faced was a newbie. It was clumsy and too much in a hurry to get to you guys." Walter says, "So what now? Do we tell people about this?" The general quickly says, "No, don't either of you say anything. I don't want to cause a scandal." William responds, "But shouldn't we warn people just in case there are more?" The general was about to respond when Walter said, "Not if there's more. There is more." The general said, "What makes you say that?" Walter responds, "Because you said we're one of the first people the creature has hunted, and we have had 10 local disappearances as of recently. So if the claim about us being the first is true, that means we either have a serial killer on the loose, or there's more of those things out there." The general asked, "Whether the bodies look like?" Walter responds, "They were never found." The general sat there and thought for a moment, then asked, "How long has this been going on?" Walter said, "For about a few months now." The general said, "Jesus Christ." He then told Walter and William to put their clothes on and leave the hospital. But right before he walked out, he turned to them and said, "If either one of you tells anyone about what happened, I will kill you and your families and anyone you told. The official report is that it was a bear. Got it?" William and Walter, surprised by the general's sudden cold demeanor, just shook their heads and said, "Yes, sir." The general said good and quickly left. William and Walter puts their clothes on and goes out to the front lobby of the hospital where their mom, uncle, Walter's wife, and 2 daughters, and William's girlfriend are waiting for them to give them a big hug and takes them home. In the weeks that followed, the physical wounds began to close. William had healed completely, and Walter's body was slowly mending, though he still walked with a heavy limp. But as their bodies got stronger, their lives fell apart. The official report blamed a rogue grizzly, but the town wasn't buying it. Local hunters pointed out that the wounds were too surgical, too deep, and most importantly, the bodies hadn't been eaten. A bear kills for food or protection, but it doesn't leave mangled remains, just to rot. Soon the whispers turned into a dark narrative. The town decided that the only monsters in those woods were the Butler boys. People claimed William and Walter had finally snapped, that they had butchered Bo and Benjamin in a drunken rage. They even invented a story for Billy's death, claiming he died trying to wrestle the weapon away from Walter, with both of them tumbling off a ledge. The harassment was relentless. They were spat on in the streets and called murderers at the grocery store. The isolation crept into their homes like a frost. Walter's wife, unable to deal with the constant harassment from the townsfolk, took the kids and left. William's girlfriend followed soon after. Their own family distanced themselves, terrified of the controversy. Finally, with nothing left but the ghosts of their old lives, they decided to leave. But they couldn't just drive away. On their final evening, they returned to the dirt trail one last time. They hiked back to the clearing, the air heavy with the smell of pine and old memories. Standing in the spot where the world had ended for their friends, William pulled out Beau's old hunting knife. With shaking hands, he carved 3 names into the ancient bark of a towering oak. Beau, Billy, Benjamin. William ran his thumb over the rough-cut letters, a silent promise that the truth lived here. Walter placed a hand on William's shoulder, staring into the darkening tree line, where the shadows seemed just a little too long. They didn't look back as they walked to the truck. They drove out of the woods and kept driving, leaving behind their home.